Okay. Well, good morning, councillors, good morning, officers, and it's Thursday, the 25th of February, and welcome to this Economy and Development Select Committee meeting. We're recording the proceedings this morning. We're not live streaming because we've got external stakeholders with us. Particularly Mr. Steve Robinson, who's the Managing Director of Atavian Solutions, who are going to form part of the presentation on procurement and how we improve our strategic procurement function as an authority. It's been a real priority for this committee ever since the start of the term, really back in 2017. It's something that's come back to us on a number of occasions, and we're really pleased that it's here and we're making progress on it this morning. Before we go into the agenda, we'll just do introductions for councillors, and when officers come in during the presentation, if you just give your names and your positions within the authority. So if I bring in Councillor Davis first.
Yes, good morning everyone. I'm County Councillor Alan Davis. I'm the County Councillor of the Green Lane Ward in Caldicot.
Councillor Roden.
Good morning all. I'm Councillor for the Dixton with Osbaston Ward in Monmouth and member of this committee.
Councillor Evans.
Good morning all. I'm a member of this committee and I'm a ward member for West End in Caldicot.
Councillor Strong.
Good morning everyone. My name's Ryan Strong. I'm the councillor for Usk and I'm a member of this committee.
Thanks, Brian. We've got two cabinet members with us this morning. We've got Cabinet Robert Greenland, who is the cabinet member for Innovation, Enterprise and Leisure, and we've got cabinet member Phil Murphy, who's the cabinet lead for Whole Authority Resources. So welcome, Phil. Welcome, Bob. You're always welcome here at this committee. So before we go into the agenda as set, obviously colleagues will no doubt have heard of the sad passing of one of our committee members, Councillor David Dovey, a long-standing member of this committee, not just this term, but previous terms. I've been really fortunate, I think, as a chair and as a colleague to have got to know David really well. He was my next door neighbour in terms of wards here in Chepstow, but as a chair, as a scrutiny committee chair, I'm fortunate because I've had the I suppose I've had the knowledge and advice of David and other members of this committee who've had previous experience or who have current business experience outside of the public sector, and that's been really invaluable, not just to me to improve my chairing and knowledge of this committee, but in terms of how we've performed as a committee. So I'm really heartbroken actually to have lost David. He was a political mentor of mine, and I'm really going to miss him, and I know colleagues and officers across the authority feel exactly the same. He's a lovely guy. So before we start the meeting, if we can just have a moment's silence just to remember David. Okay. Okay, thanks everyone for that. So if we go into the agenda then, agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. Hazel, do we have apologies? I think we've got a couple of apologies this morning.
Yes, Chair, we've got apologies from Councillors Feekins and Blakeborough. Okay,
thanks, Hayes. Item number 2 then, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations that members need to make at this stage?
As and when, Chair.
As and when, yeah, as long as you obviously declare it and then fill in the pro forma if such a conflict arises. Item number 3 is the public open forum. We don't have any members of the public this morning to take that opportunity up. So agenda item 4, procurement progress report on the review of procurement policy. So this is the most substantial item really on the agenda this morning. Kathy, are you going to start and kick us off?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if I just walk us through the report initially, just to set the scene, and then we can take questions from there, if that sounds okay.
Yeah, if you can just introduce yourself, Kath, if that's okay.
I certainly will. Yes, I'm Kath Fallon. I'm head of Enterprise and Community Animation. And I'm joined today by colleagues, but also from Steve Robinson, who's actually here as head of procurement for Cardiff County Council or Cardiff City Council. So thank you. In terms of the report itself, we're asking members to consider a proposal to collaborate with Cardiff Council for mutual benefit in the discharge and provision of procurement services. And this is really to consider the proposal prior to it forming part of the budget setting process for 21-22. We initially established a review of the strategic procurement services through a TABIN, which is the trading arm of Cardiff Council's procurement services. And the review actually confirmed the council's own recognition of a limited capacity with a small team, with our strategic procurement manager and also our senior procurement officer. And that small team really have that limited capacity to influence behaviours in relation to the £100 million third-party annual spend that the authority has, and particularly in terms of how we influence that spend in terms of delivering the council's priorities in terms of innovation, economic, social, environmental, but also cultural wellbeing, value for money efficiency, alongside governance and risk management. So on receipt of the review, we considered that, and initially the review suggested that we built into the team an additional 3 category specialists and a business systems analyst to increase that capacity. However, on reflection, it was really felt that review didn't really go far enough in terms of undertaking the fundamental transformation of the service that we really needed to do in order to enable the council to spend more wisely, to improve our procurement governance and therefore reduce risk, but also to be at the forefront of some of the burgeoning national regulation changes, such as the introduction of socio-economic duty, and also in terms of our next steps with regard to the proposed TOMS framework, which is the themes, outcomes and measures, that actually looks at how we measure social value alongside our procurement, with a view then to looking at how we increase the community benefits of our council contracts, looking to create local employment through apprenticeship opportunities, sort of adding value to our local supply chains and local businesses, etc. Particularly in terms of how we've really stepped up our ambitions as a council with regard to social justice agenda, so really looking at how we sort of tackle some of the major issues within our county in terms of sort of tackling poverty and homelessness. And really how we look at promoting equitable prosperity ahead of the socio-economic duty that's coming in, which will actually ensure that we help reduce inequalities and look in terms of our strategic decisions to ensure that we're actually sort of taking that socio-economic disadvantage into account. So in a strategic procurement context, we felt there's a real need to have a much stronger focus on local wealth creating opportunities, particularly from an enterprise and local economic development perspective. So opening up more opportunities for our local companies to bid for contracts through more sort of meet the buyer events, but actually breaking down contracts so that they're more accessible really, so that we can start looking to safeguard our local employment and sort of generate additional job opportunities for residents. We also need to give a focus to the circular economy in terms of decarbonisation, looking at reuse and recycling, and also our foundational economy in terms of sort of enabling and enhancing our local supply chains for our local hospitality sector, and actually strengthening that supplier support really through encouraging recruitment in the local care sector, for example, and our local retail sector. So we sort of looked at this in the round really, and the proposal that we're bringing you today takes the findings of the review into account, and by asking members to consider entering into a mutually beneficial collaboration with Cardiff Council, initially for 3 years. Should this be successful, it would move to a rolling contract. The council would involve the councils collaborating really in the discharge and provision of the procurement services, which would then be delegated to Cardiff Council on behalf of both councils. So in doing so, the council, Monmouthshire County Council, would be delegating its procurement functions for a 3-year period. But there's also flexibility within that for us to exercise and to undertake procurement activities ourselves, really, within the agreement. So it will the benefits of this agreement is that will enable us to benefit from a bigger team. We'll be increasing with new starters in terms of full-time staff, but also, you know, sort of we'll be benefiting from the highly respected and award-winning Cardiff Council team. Sorry, Steve, I'm embarrassing you, but in terms of the work that Cardiff has been doing, has been exemplary in terms of their leadership and management, and how they transformed procurement within Cardiff and played a key role in that collaboration at a regional and national level, particularly in terms of technical capability and expertise that they can provide, but also in terms of strategy and policy being recognised across Wales as sort of delivering good practice in support of local and national priority. However, the delegation is not a one-way relationship. It will provide an opportunity for us to share in wider good practice and give them more of a focus on whole life costs, and in terms of how we manage our sort of contract and works pipeline as well, and do that analysis of our spend. So really it's very much same of mutual benefit. It's on a cost covering proposal as opposed to sort of you know, income generation for Cardiff. And in terms of our recent Infuse programme and our Monmouthshire's leadership of that, we'll be looking at sort of public sector skills innovation, of which procurement is one of the work streams we'll be focusing on. And we'll be linking very much into the South East Wales procurement network as part of that activities as well. So it's coming at absolutely the right time. In terms of our current team, we're in informal consultations at the moment, and we'll move towards formal consultations subject to the proposal being approved. So in terms of the actual proposal itself, we've gone through a full options appraisal. You know, we could, if we, for example, didn't do anything, the budget would remain the same. We'd still be in a situation where our team remained under-resourced. And we would still we wouldn't have the access to that greater knowledge. We've got a lack of contract management currently within the authority, and obviously that would put us in a, you know, risk situation. And also we're not able to benefit from those wider opportunities, you know, sort of create local wealth within the local supply chain. We could remain in-house and invest, therefore we'd retain our autonomy, we'd have additional capacity, but those are actually, all those costs would then be borne by the authority. It's going to take time to recruit to those posts, and we couldn't guarantee that we would be in a position to really meet those priorities, and particularly in terms of risk management and governance as well. The other opportunity would be to look at an open exercise where we consider the whole of market. Again, there's a time factor in there. Again, there are costs associated with that in terms of legal scrutiny, etc. And that is unlikely to result in a cost covering model that we're being offered with Cardiff. In terms of the mutually beneficial delegation, therefore, as mentioned, we've got access here to an award-winning team, that increased capacity, and that understanding really, and that insight that we'll be able to get in terms of our current spend, but also improving our contract management skills, and actually reducing our off-contract spend, enable us to be more accurate, and sort of speedier highlighting of any compliance issues, and really also to open up those wider benefits to our local economy. Obviously, we would need to ensure that we were looking at the delivery of this, so that the plan is for us to produce a delivery plan, which we will review regularly. But also, we would look to bring back to you for your this sort of scrutiny as well, to ensure that we're meeting the objectives as we've actually sort of set out. Okay, so that's probably where we are for the moment. In terms of, the only other thing would be cost. Total cost of the proposal is 319,000 per year over the 3 years, which actually only equates to 0.3% of our annual budget spend. However, the cost is sort of split between the existing MCC budget of 112 and the additional pressure of 207k, which would actually be looking to address through the budget process. So I would suggest that's where we are for the moment, and if we can take questions, please.
Okay, thanks, Kath. I don't know, Steve, did you want to say anything? Give a brief introduction of yourself. I think what just might be helpful for members. Oh, we've lost him, have we? Yeah, we've lost him briefly. Okay, I'll bring Steve back in when he comes back online. Oh, Steve, he's back with us.
Yeah, apologies.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, children homeschooling, I think, is the problem.
Yeah, Steve, I just wondered if you just wanted to give a brief introduction of yourself, really, for members, and any initial thoughts you have, I suppose, because you've been involved in the review process. It would be useful, I think, to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Okay, I suppose just a very quick bit of background. So I've actually worked for formerly South Glamorgan County Council, now Cardiff Council, since 1988. So I've kind of done my dues, as they say. I've been head of procurement for Cardiff for the past 12 years. I'm actually an accountant by profession, and I've obviously moved in, but been working within the procurement area for a number of years, as well as being head of commission and procurement for Cardiff Council. I'm chair of the National Procurement Network for Wales and chair of the National Social Value Task Force for Wales as well. There was reference to a Tebian solution, so we've actually established a local authority trading company. So we trade in commercial and procurement services. So obviously we did the review for Monmouth initially under that remit, but obviously that's something we're currently doing quite a bit of work for a large authority just over the bridge, I should say. So, and I think the reason that's relevant is we're fortunate that we get to work with a number of different organisations, different authorities with different challenges, different levels of maturity. So, although obviously what I predominantly bring is the experience of what we've achieved within Cardiff, what we're able to do is kind of recognise what good practice looks everywhere we go, and certainly we're very keen to say that we don't have all the answers. We don't know everything. Yeah, we learn as much from the people we work with as what we bring. But I'd like to think that's one of the strengths that we have, is that collaboration in the way that we work, and certainly that for me is something that's going to be really important in terms of the work that we do with Monmouth. I mean, met briefly with the senior leadership team on Tuesday, and just by way of example, some of the work that Monmouth have done around social care has been fantastic. I mean, you're fortunate you've had a kind of longevity in terms of continuity in terms of senior management there. So without a doubt, as much as we'll be looking to bring our knowledge and experience to support areas like that, I'll be very interested in terms of what we can learn as well from some of the really good practice that will exist in Monmouth. I think we have achieved a lot in Cardiff. I've been very well supported both by senior management and by our cabinet over the years. I think it's an increasing focus, I guess, over the particularly the last 3 or 4 years on the kind of wider social, economic, environmental agenda. In Cardiff, you may or may not know that we're living wage city, so the living wage programme has been something that we've delivered through the procurement team, but also we are kind of leading a lot of the work at the moment around social value. So Kath mentioned Tom's, and I think, you know, that's something that is a level of experience and knowledge that we can bring with us, which I'm not looking at, we will never be looking to impose anything we do in Cardiff on Monmouth, because we are quite different organisations in terms of geography, in terms of supply, in terms of priorities. I don't think we're completely different in terms of priorities, but there will be differences. So I kind of want to give an assurance that actually, although we'll bring the knowledge with us and the expertise and the skills, actually then it will be about making sure that fits with the priorities for the organisation and are right for the context of your organisation as well. I think one thing I suppose I always go back to is the most important thing are the people that work within our team, yeah, because I mean, we need to set clear direction, we need to have clear strategy, we need to know what we're doing. But actually, I suppose one of the things, and again, Kath alluded to it, is just going out and saying, here's 3 new posts, go and recruit 3 new procurement people is easier said than done. And I think what we've done, just so you're aware, over the last 6-7 years now, we've run a student placement programme with the University of South Wales. And what that's enabled us to do is to actually bring people in their gap year. They spend a year with us, and invariably the majority of those individuals have then gone on to have full-time employment with us. So what it's enabled us to do is kind of build a level of expertise and capability within the team, which I think is probably unrivaled, really, you know, and that I would also say that across the border in the authorities we work with in England as well. I think they're quite envious of the fact that we've made that kind of long-term investment in building our team. And the way that the model is constructed, there will be an element of the funding which will be, you know, for my time for some of my senior managers, also our strategy and policy team, who I think will be quite key in terms of some of the kind of wider policy work that we'll be looking to do. But actually, what this has also given us the opportunity, and I was very clear about this, was that I didn't want this to be just delivered based on existing capacity, because I don't think that would be fair on Cardiff or Monmouth. So part of the proposal was that we would then look to recruit 3 additional posts into the Cardiff team, which would then enable us to support the work across both authorities. But again, what we're not looking to do, for example, so we operate the teams. We have 3 teams across 3 key category areas. So 1 for social and people, 1 for environment, which covers things from maintenance and waste management, etc. And then we have a team who look after kind of the corporate range of categories, which ICT, professional services, a whole range. But what we'll be looking to do is, rather than saying, oh, these 3 individuals will be ring-fenced just for Monmouth, what we'll be looking to do is to tap into the expertise across those teams in terms of supporting the delivery of the pipeline of work going forward as well. So it kind of gives, and I think what that does, it gives a resilience both for the work for Cardiff and for Monmouth, which if we didn't have the scale we have, we wouldn't be able to achieve. And I think, and just to give you some idea of that, that will, with the work, what we're going to be doing with UGA, you know, with Monmouth, assuming that goes forward, then we'd be building the team up to a strength of 34 FTE. Just to put that in context, though, only 19 of those FTE are base funded now in Cardiff. So what we've done is through things like Atebian, through the work we've done, taking on some of the major collaborative contracts like SUSCAP and South East Wales Highways. We're currently doing the regional consultancy framework. That's given us an opportunity to generate revenue into the team, which has enabled us to continue to do that investment. Yeah, so it's, I suppose, really in a way, it was always a bit of a long-term plan of ours that we never felt we always felt there was going to be an increasing need for good quality procurement expertise. And I think we took a very early decision, well, actually, let's try and find ways we can invest in that. So, you know, and I suppose a key theme that we've had through the work we've done recently over the last year around the wider WRGA national group has really been about how we can continue to build capability and capacity within local government for the benefit of local government, and really about trying to reduce the reliance on having to go to consultancies and organizations, and really try and use that money to continue to kind of reinvest. So sorry, that was a bit of a waffle, apologies, but yeah, just to kind of give you a bit of a sense, really, I guess, of where we've come from.
No, thanks, Steve. That was a really useful context you've given there. So I can hear feedback now, so I don't know if someone's microphone's on. There we are. Okay, we'll open it up to questions then. Members, Councillor Davis, I think, wants to come in first. Councillor Davis?
I didn't have my hand up, but you called me anyway.
No, I can see it in your eyes, Alan.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Steve, for that presentation explanation. Very good. I think you know, all of the committee members on economy and development, for a long time now, we've recognised the significant benefits that the authority could get by improving our procurement system. I think, you know, we're all aware of that. Some of us have business experience, and I think even those that weren't directly involved in business recognised that there were substantial benefits to be gained there. So, so in terms of when we start this exercise, I mean, really, two things were very apparent to us. One was that there was insufficient resource, that our officers were working very hard on a system without having, you know, the adequate resources to actually do, I assume, what I think what they would have liked to do many times. And the other thing was that the more we looked, we recognised that our data system, in terms of what we logged in terms of our spend, was, I'm going to say this politely, but it was very difficult to navigate. And in my opinion, it was like the Enigma code in terms of being able to actually interrogate it and you know, identify where all the spend was going and identify patterns of spend and that sort of thing. So I think those were the two things that we really felt needed to be addressed. And obviously that proposal, this proposal, sorry, addresses in terms of the number of officers we have and the potential to improve in that respect. But I still have concerns about our ability to analyse data, I think, which is something we need to address. In the document which we've put forward, it says here, in a strategic procurement context, the council will need to have a much stronger focus on local wealth creating opportunities, changing the focus from assessments purely based on costs. Well, you know, I understand that, because as a former manager, I've been on the receiving end of good procurement and bad procurement, and I know that it's not all about cost, because there are major benefits from having good relationships with certain suppliers, which both can benefit from the suppliers and, you know, and the customer. So I've been on this, but we mustn't also lose sight of the fact that the pennies are important as well, because as an old saying goes, those pennies make pounds. And I've also got experience of where, as a very major company, we were exploited by people who, well, let's face it, were charging us much more than we should have been charged for things which we could have got for equal quality somewhere else. And that's where being able to analyse the data concerns me. So, and of course, we're going to make what is for us a significant investment in this, £207,000. And what I'm not seeing in the document is how we, you know, as a manager, if I'm making an investment, I want to see a return on that investment. And I'm not seeing within the documentation how we're going to demonstrate to the members, to the cabinet, and to the taxpayers that we represent, what are those benefits likely to be. You know, the generalized information looks good, but what specific metrics are we going to be able to say to people? Well, look, over the next period of time, this has really worked because we can demonstrate X, Y, and Z. And I think I'm not seeing that within this documentation. So those are my concerns. And I know that some members, you know, have other questions to ask you with regard to the relationship between Monmouthshire County Council and this new initiative. But if you could address those, please, I'd be very grateful, because there's huge potential here. I think we all know that. Very pleased to see that we had taken it seriously. It seems like a long time since we brought this topic up, but we need to be convinced that there's going to be major benefits that result from it as well. And I think we need to demonstrate that by saying, well, these are the benefits we expect, not generalised comments about the impact on our social services and things like that, but what are we actually going to see in terms of pounds, shillings and pence? Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. I'll obviously open it up to officers to respond. I don't know who wants to take first stab at Alan's questions. Kath?
Yes, if it's okay, I'll open up and then Steve can add in it if that's okay. We do recognise, obviously, there's a need for us to monitor progress, and actually that's something that Scott particularly as we've been talking about, really, to ensure that you know, we can demonstrate the benefits that this will bring us. So we've agreed that we're going to develop an annual plan, which we will review regularly. So not only myself and Scott and Steve will review, but also through our senior leadership team and yourselves as Economic Development Committee. So we're in the process of developing that at the moment. That will be along the lines of the priorities that we talked about in terms of environmental, social, well-being, etc. And we will add metrics to that. So say that will be in development, so we'll be able to monitor progress. It's very important for us all to understand where we are, not only in the current process, but as we move forward as well, so we can demonstrate that progress. So Scott or Steve, I don't know if you want to add in on that.
Yeah, I mean, I just pick up on your point around data. I mean, yeah, I mean, as Scott will know, and I guess being an accountant, I can, you know, I love nothing other than a big spreadsheet. So yeah, I mean, to be honest, understanding what you spend, who you spend it with, how you're spending it, how that aligns to your suppliers in terms of locality, in terms of size of those organizations, all of that is absolutely essential for me. It kind of provides a really key foundation for everything we do. And the only thing I would say is, don't beat yourselves up too much that you feel you're not where you'd want to be with that, because actually I've just spent the last 3 weeks doing exactly that piece of work from ground zero with a major local authority just over the bridge. And I did a presentation to their senior leadership team yesterday, because they just did not know what they're spending, who they're spending it with, or etc. So, but for me, that will be without a doubt one of the key first pieces of work that we would be looking to do in the plan. And actually we've already kind of started some of that work, because we did some of that work when we came in as a Tebian in terms of that commission. So I can absolutely assure you that that will be absolutely fundamental, and it's kind of what we've used in Cardiff to drive all of the changes in terms of, because some of the change that we need to potentially bring through will be around cultural shift as well, you know, and actually really what we, you know, so for example, what I do in Cardiff at the moment, and we haven't decided if this is what I'll do in Monmouth, but you know, every quarter I go to the senior leadership team, so you know, with the chief exec and the directors, and we give them updates and insights into performance and issues that are happening. Because but actually it's not about us trying to become the audit. You know, the audit have got their role to do, but it's about working in partnership with them to help them be aware of what their performance looks like. And you know, and so that's that's absolutely key, and there will be a key obviously part of what we look to try and bring in. And I guess I always kind of look at it as like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Getting that governance and risk management piece in is as a core, you know, as a baseline, it is really key. But and it's from that then that we're able to build on in terms of things around improving value for money, but also the increasing focus on delivering around social, economic, environmental well-being. And I absolutely share your view on how you can evidence then what you've achieved there. So, I mean, savings is always a challenging one. I mean, again, this authority working with, all they keep saying is find us the low-hanging fruit. And we say, well, if you've got low-hanging fruit still available, what have you been doing for the last 10 years, really? Because, you know, and Scott's chuckling away because, yeah, we see it all the time. And actually what we find is the way you drive value, don't get me wrong, it's not to say you don't sometimes find something, you think, my goodness me, you know, what have you been doing, guys? You know, this is people have been addressing this, you know, and believe me, we found some quite interesting insights that we shared with their senior management team yesterday, which I think were quite shocking to them. So I'm not saying I won't find these, but I can't guarantee it because we've not done the work yet. However, what we can do, and again, what we've shown there is actually often the way that you can actually quantifiably look to try and manage spend better is by better understanding what you're spending, who's spending it, how they're spending it. So it's building on that foundation to really understand. And one of the things that we're quite keen to focus on as well is around managing demand, because, you know, as much as we can look to try and get better deals in price, to, you know, look at better unit prices on goods, but actually what we tend to try and look at are opportunities where we can take cost out. So things that we're spending money on, you think, well, why are we spending money on this? You know, and some of that will unfortunately come down to looking at things like controls and policy and things, which will, for me, be part of what we'll be looking to challenge the organisation on and look to try and bring in. But even when we're looking at things like the social value agenda, I think the key, you know, we've all been doing to various degrees, building community benefits into our contracts for a number of years. And to be honest, I'll always, you know, give kudos and credit to Welsh Government because, you know, it's an agenda they drove probably, you know, 10 years ago. But the reality is that we've slipped behind, you know, and again, some of it, you know, Phil, we were talking about the demise of WPC and the MPS, that had quite a negative impact in Wales in terms of that wider policy agenda. But actually, and this is something that we've led from within WLGA, because to be fair, Welsh Government have got so many internal issues they're trying to resolve on procurement. They've not really been providing the leadership. But what we liked about the TOMs, and the reason why we've been championing it, is it gives a very visible, evidence-based view of the delivery of social value, whether that's around employment, apprenticeships, whether it's around support for community projects. The challenge we always had under our old model was how do you compare apples and pears, because you've got quite different proposals, but also how do you track the delivery of that, and how do you actually be able to report and evidence what's been delivered. So these are all component parts, and that I think we've started to introduce the TOMs into our tenders. I guess there's a lot of authorities who are put off because it's you've got to get your head around it, and I guess that is one of the things that we've said. Again, part of the early plan would be to look to see how we can start to introduce that as a model into Monmouth. But the final thing I'll say though is the other key thing, and to be honest, if in our hands up, is probably an area that is a developing area for Cardiff, but it's around contract management, because I think I can be as guilty as anybody working in procurement that we kind of love the front end bit. You know, we love the analyze the spend, do the sourcing exercise, look for different ways of working, look to try and put these fantastic new innovative arrangements in place. But we can all be a bit guilty if we kind of forget about then, well, these arrangements need to be managed. You know, if we're going to truly get the value and the benefit out of those, whether it's around pricing, whether it's around demand and controls, whether it's around the social value delivery elements of it, it needs to be managed. And so we've just started in Cardiff, and we've been doing a lot of work over the last 6 months, but we're just starting to implement a new approach to contract management across the authority. But obviously, again, I'd like to think one of the benefits that we'll be able to bring is, well, we've kind of done all the hard work around that. in terms of really figuring out what we think will work in a very practical sense. And again, we can bring that in and work with Scott and Kath and the team there to make sure we develop it in a way that will be fit for Monmouth. So again, those are some of the kind of practical things. Sorry, I will give you a warning. When you get me talking, I find it hard to stop, but hopefully you can get a sense of some of the kind of real practical things. And I have to apologize. Sometimes I can, and I know Scott's the same, we can be quite passionate about this agenda, you know, but hopefully you'll perceive that as a positive rather than a negative. So
thanks, Steve. Before I go back to Alan, Scott, did you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Paul. I think, as always, Steve is as eloquent as he needs to be, I guess, for our profession. The only thing that I would pick up on is one of the fundamentals at the beginning of these conversations were around centres of excellence, and I know we've waxed lyrical quite a bit about it within Welsh, within a Welsh government context, and I think this is actually putting our money where our mouth is in terms of Cardiff being that centre of expertise. They've got the they've had the conditions where they're aware of lots of different procurement operating models, and they've had the exposure to building arenas and multi-purpose schools and a whole myriad of different complex services and structures that possibly Monmouthshire have not had that exposure to. I think, to be honest as well, there's probably a challenge for me back to members, and I think that challenge is about understanding whole life costing, and as Steve and Kath have touched on as well. Some of our spend will have resources attached to it where we can actually strategize and understand where we drive cost out. Other services will once we've dictated what it is we require, we'll realise that they're not areas where we drive cost out. So we have to remember, I appreciate that finances are finite, but there is in terms of the whole life costing, there needs to be a balance between some of the social inputs that are required, some of the wellbeing of future gens, some of the stuff around ethical supply chains, and some of the stuff about locality and spending our money within our local economic development, within our boundaries. So apologies if that sounds a little bit terse, but I think it probably is a challenge that we all need to agree to and we all need to understand.
Thanks, Scott. Alan, do you want to come back in? You've put yourself on mute, Alan. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much for those responses, both of you. I mean, I'm very impressed, and I think the honest way in which you've approached it is, only bodes well for the future, I think. I think what it does highlight to me, we were right as a committee to prioritise procurement, I think, as an issue within the authority. I've repeated myself, but I think you'll both agree that there's huge potential here within this authority and many others, I suspect. But the resource and the data are the important things, I think. I'm not an expert on procurement, even though I've had some very good and some very bad experiences of it in my career, I can tell you. But you were both my friends now, because I'm really encouraged by what you've said. And I think as a committee, we did get a little bit frustrated because we thought, well, very little progress is being made here, and God, there's opportunities here. Why aren't they being taken? But I'm very encouraged now, and I think the other committee members will be as well, and so should the cabinet members as well, because I think we will reap major benefits. It's not going to happen overnight, and there are things that I don't understand about procurement, and I'm sure some of the other members here don't understand about it. But I am confident now that we are going to have the right team in place and we are going to head in the right direction. So thank you both for that.
Thanks, Alan. Councillor Roden next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Steve and Scott, for your comments on Alan's questions. He actually stole some of my questions, by the way, which we agreed to before pre-meet. But coming down to the sort of the nuts and bolts aspect, and bearing in mind what Scott's just said, what would you see as a measure of success of this programme should it come into fruition? Would we see a reduction in cost? And if so, would there be figures put into the contract where there would be an expectation of a cost reduction? Secondly, in terms of the review that you've done so far, did you look at comparative costs in any categories between Monmouth and Cardiff in terms of benchmarking? Be quite interested to know if there's much of a difference currently. And finally, assuming on the assumption that the programme would go ahead, are the skill sets of the staff that we have at MCC the right kind of skill sets to work with the people at Cardiff as it currently stands? Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Roden. Again, I'll leave it up to officers how they want to pick this up.
Yeah, I don't mind picking a start.
Okay,
if I pick the last question first, so skill sets in Monmouth. I think if you're referring to Scott and Sue, then absolutely yes. You know, I think you know, I've been fortunate to know Scott, well, probably 10, 12 years. I'd like to think that we have a very strong professional and personal relationship. And you know, I think it's you know, I know it's been probably a constant frustration for Scott that, you know, he kind of is. I mean, we're very strongly aligned in terms of our passions and our beliefs about what procurement can and should be delivering for an organisation. So I have absolutely no reservations or concerns in that respect at all. And in Sue, I think, you know, she's been described as the glue that kind of holds things together, and that's fairly evident from the positive things that have been said to us both when we did the initial review and subsequently, and also from the discussions that I had with Sue as well. You know, so we see that Sue will become kind of integral key part of our team, and in particular, I guess, through that first year where, you know, we're getting to know Monmouth and getting to understand the individuals in Monmouth, and you know so I'm going to be absolutely key. In terms of reduction in cost, it's an interesting one because we did we called it a category management program in Cardiff, going back about 6-7 years ago, and off the back of that program, we were able to deliver a £12 million reduction in general fund spend. Yeah, so all signed off by finance, boom, in the budget, job done. Yeah. However, I hate the idea of procurement being given a savings target. Yeah. Because what I find, my experience is, it drives the wrong behaviours. So, for example, this work we're doing with another authority, they've been given a savings target, and already everyone's getting into a bun fight over, well, whose saving is that? Is it the directorate saving? Is it procurement saving? So, and so I think from my point of view, I mean, the way really we've operated within Cardiff probably for the last 5-6 years is more about the procurement team's role is there to support the directorates, yeah, who ultimately are the budget holders, to support their budget savings, yeah. So it doesn't mean to say there will not be opportunities to drive out some rate reductions in some of the sort of commonly bought goods and services, although, to be honest, a lot of that stuff we tend to buy off the same collaborative arrangements anyway. So a lot of the unit pricing is going to be broadly the same. And I think that's always been one of the key arguments for collaborative buying, which I know Scott has been a big advocate for, is that, for example, the authorities within South East Wales if we're being honest, benefit from the scale of buy-in from the likes of Cardiff and Caerphilly RCT, because often those contracts are priced on a regional basis. You get the value and benefit, and obviously that's something, if anything, we're looking to improve and grow on from a national and a regional point of view. But I think where the real value will come is working with directorates to support them to deliver the changes in the way that their services operate, because actually from our experience that's where the biggest gains and rewards come from, and actually the biggest benefits that we've seen working for any organisation, in particular Cardiff, has been where the directorate, and I don't just mean the directors but the service managers, are open to doing things differently, because there's a bit of a misconception, albeit I do accept some of this comes with maturity, that procurement is, if anything, a blocker to innovation. We bring our rules in and we stop you being able to do anything and everything you want to do. But actually, my experience is often the opposite is true, in that we will be challenging services. Well, why are you doing it this way? You know, is there not a different way we could do it, where we could? And actually, often we're the ones getting the pushback. Yeah. Now, all I can say is I've only had one session with your senior leadership team, which was on Tuesday morning. But it's fair to say I came off that call bouncing, yeah, because I actually felt, you know, if everyone's true to their word, we've got a senior leadership team there who are really up for this. You know, they're really up for the challenge of looking to do things differently. And so I think I'm probably not directly answering your question in terms of, have you got a target for savings? But I honestly believe that if the organization's willing to look to try and do things differently, those savings benefits, and in terms of the cost reduction for your services, will come through. Yeah. I mean, we haven't yet talked in detail about, are we going to set savings targets? Again, it's something that I would push back against, not because I'm afraid that we wouldn't achieve it, but I think it's just whether it starts to kind of drive some of the kind of wrong behaviours. But I guess I can only try and give you some assurance by the work we've done in the past for Cardiff. We are very mindful on the need that part of our reason will be here to support you with your budget position, as well as supporting some of the wider benefits that we're looking to help you to achieve there. In terms of the comparative, we didn't do a lot of benchmarking at that point. Like I say, a lot of the stuff, I mean, but it's an interesting challenge, benchmarking, and I know that from experience. I remember when we were doing the initial work, Scott, you'll remember when the discussions were ongoing about establishing a new national buying service, which became the MPS. Benchmarking like for like were outside of the core commodity type. You know, if we want to benchmark the cost of a pencil, well, we can, but in the grand scheme of things, it means nothing. Yeah. And I think it's about the problem and actually I think sometimes benchmarking can hide differences in geography. So if we're all honest, your single biggest area for general fund spend is going to be social care. Yeah. And you get into all sorts of challenges and issues when you start trying to benchmark, because it's a very local driven. You've got to understand local workforce issues and all sorts of other issues. So sorry, I'm probably not answering your question, but I think it's just to give you some assurance that in the work that we do, part of the work we would do will be very mindful in terms of how we can take cost out, but that might not always be about trying to drive down the lowest unit price, which is where I think benchmarking can become problematic.
Yeah, really fascinating. Thank you very much for that, Steve. Really excellent. Just an aspect. Oh, sorry, Scott.
Yeah, go on, Scott. You follow up on Steve before Richard comes back for his supplementary. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Fascinating discussions. If I can take the last point first that Steve did around the skill sets, fully in full agreement with what has been discussed so far. For me, being the person that's been at the coal front for the last 12 years, I think I've got some, in terms of skill sets, as Steve alluded, Sue and myself are fine. We're both MSIPs qualified with 12 years experience each. I think for me, and Steve has touched on this, it's the education or the cultural paradigms that play themselves out in the devolved units. I think to get the best out of our relationship with Cardiff, we need to ensure that there's an element of training within those devolved units. And that touches on a lot of these issues for me, especially the benchmarking. So I think that, you know, that is an action that we need to pick up in terms of actually understanding who the main players are in terms of our expenditure profiles and making sure that they've got the relevant and proportionate training to ensure that we then drive out the outcomes that members require. In terms of benchmarking, another very interesting discussion, and I think again there can be perverse outcomes, as Steve alluded to earlier. You know, if you can imagine, within the categories that Steve referenced earlier, we will have a procurement strategy that will drive the outcome of any different commodity. So, for argument's sake, stationery. If I take that, everybody understands stationery. The imperative there would be to drive costs down. So we're more than happy, as long as we are still procuring in an ethical manner, we are more than happy to try and drive prices out. And I would also say there, as long as we're not, then it's not detrimental to local businesses. So there's a whole host of considerations that are needed around all of the imperatives that drive procurement. And as Steve said, you know, when we're talking about social care, that is very much about securing supply. So in a lot of those instances, these people are on minimum wage. You know, we wouldn't want to be driving prices any lower. We need to be putting together a package that is probably more, you know, it's seen as more beneficial to the people who will actually take up those posts. Then finally, around the what would success look like? I guess we have to be mindful of central government legislation and again Welsh Government nearer to home around delivering balanced outcomes. So where the imperative is to drive cost out, that will be the priority. We'll then have areas where we need to secure supply. And then we'll have areas where we need to go very high on some of the community benefits aspects. So it'll be a bit of a smorgasbord of outcomes that you will see, and obviously that will be evidence to you then in the reports that come back to you on whichever basis you decide.
Thanks, Scott. Richard, do you want to come back?
Just to say thanks to both of you for your input. It's been fascinating for me. I just have one sort of question, and this is, does your sort of buying style of operation compare with the private sector, or is it very different? It seems to me quite different, but that's because I'm not an expert in this area. I'm just curious to how you compare. Do they look after targets? Do they have a different kind of priority set to yourselves? And is that across all industry? I'm just unsure, really. And if you can give me some information on that, it'd be very helpful. Thanks. How you set yourselves, you know, how you see yourselves compared with the private sector. That's really it.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, one of the challenges we have is the sheer diversity of what we buy. Yeah, so, you know, often, you know, there's a lot of talk, for example, about a way of managing spend called category management that we've brought in Cardiff, but we know within a local government environment, it's always going to be sub-optimized because, you know, a major private sector firm could have somebody, all they do is look at a particular type of widget and that's all they do. Yeah, they become an absolute expert in that particular thing. What we've tried to do in Cardiff is adopt a similar principle. So I guess that the category management approach has come from private sector, but what we've had to do is kind of tailor it to meet what, you know, a model that works well for local government. So what we have done is, and this is what I was alluding to earlier, we've established 3 core teams who look after different areas of spend. So we've got our kind of social and people, which is, as you'd expect, all of our kind of adult children's social care, educational placements, housing, often housing related issues around supporting people and so forth. We'll have our environment team who look after everything from construction, buildings, maintenance of buildings, parks, maintenance, buildings, etc., you know, highways and so forth. And then we've got a corporate team who kind of pick up everything else, if I'm honest. So everything from office supplies through to ICT, through to passenger transport, professional services, consultancy agency, a whole range. And then within those teams, they will have individuals who will lead on certain areas. So they become kind of semi-expert in terms of understanding what the organization's needs and requirements are, but also understanding what the market can offer. And by what the market can offer, sometimes that's also understanding, well, what's this authority done, or what's it? So it's looking at good practice elsewhere. So I think so. And then what we've looked to try and do is so those, I guess, they're good. They kind of come from private sector, but it's then bringing that knowledge together of what we as an organisation need again, and what the market can offer, and bringing those 2 things together to try and put in place the optimum solution. That's always our aim, to try and do it. And like I said, sometimes the barrier to that optimum solution is not what the art of the possible is, or what it's the service themselves. Yeah, that we don't want to go that way. We've always done it this way. And so I think that is probably an example. The only thing that I would say though is and we know, we alluded to earlier the difficulty of recruiting good procurement people. Yeah, in the 12 years that I've been in this role, I can only think of one individual that I've recruited who actually came from a private sector background, and that's because my experience is the way in which these individuals manage procurement within private sector is far more one-dimensional than the expectations and requirements on a procurement officer within local government in particular, but public sector, I guess, generally, because of the much broader expectations, that fall upon us in terms of that role, whether it's around the working with the regulations, whether it's about the wider policy that we're trying to deliver on. You know, whenever we've interviewed people, they just don't get it. Yeah, they've just not. So even though I think sometimes working in local, and I say I've worked local government, man and boy, I was 22, I suppose I was young enough. But you kind of sometimes think, oh, have I missed a chance? Should I have gone out and tested myself against the best in the private sector? Well, actually, I think from a procurement profession, I think the best actually do exist in public sector and local government in particular. I think the challenge is there's just not enough of us, yeah? And I think that's hopefully where I think this arrangement is one thing we keep saying, well, let's maximize the use of the resources that we have. And I think this arrangement will help us with that.
Okay, thanks
you
Steve.
very much.
I've got Councillor Murphy. I wanted to come in. Phil?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And I mean, Scott and Steve have covered a lot of what I was going to say since I put my hand up. But just to sort of summarise where I am with this, this is more about culture, approach, a wider community benefit. It's not all about money, although savings often come out of it. And I've seen how these guys work. We spend a lot of time together, as coming back to our conversation before the meeting started, through the WPC. What I've heard of this discussion so far reminds me an awful lot of what used to go on there. It was a very good model. We've got a more concentrated model here, but it's working along the same lines. So, I'm very pleased to see it. The approach is good, and I'm looking forward very much to the collaboration. It's going to work well. I know it is.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Alan, you want to come back in?
Yes, just very briefly, Chair. I think Scott hit on something which is very important in my experience in business, and that is the training of people in the different directives. Because in every business I've ever been part of, there are different cultures that exist within different, I would term them departments, but obviously the terminology is different here. And the other thing is, Scott talked about ethical procurement. From my personal experience, within private enterprise, which is what my experience is, that has not always been the case. And I can say that all my hand on my heart and say that there has been dire consequences as a result of that for external companies who were forced into administration because of a policy purely based on reducing price. And it also, in some instances, doesn't give the desired effect anyway, because that then resulted in problems within the processes themselves. And also it had dire consequences to some of the employees, because some of them lost their lives as a result of the fact that the equipment was bought on the basis of price, not on its quality. So I think, that I think as for members, that really sums up that there's a lot more to procurement than price. And from what I've heard from both of you, I think the committee members can be very confident that we are moving in the right direction. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Alan. I've got Brian Strong wants to come in. Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Kath, to Scott and to Steve for their contribution so far. Before the meeting we had a discussion, and I was interested to hear of Alan's concerns about this proposal, but from the way that Steve and Scott have expressed themselves so clearly and honestly, I would say, I'm more than happy to go along with the recommendation. I haven't got a question actually, because I think a lot of pertinent questions have been asked and answers given very well. So yes, I'm really happy to go along with this. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian. I've got just a couple of questions really in terms of understanding monitoring and governance, and it's obviously might be for Kath and Scott. You sort of alluded to various points of review. I don't know, obviously mindful this committee has seen procurement as a big priority. We're mindful of our scrutiny function, and we don't want to operationalize ourselves. But potentially in terms of shaping that monitoring piece, I'm sure members would like some input potentially in that, and how that comes back to us as a committee. Obviously, Cabinet will have their their own remit on that, and I suppose the other linked factor in this is the contract management and understanding where the potential break clauses are. Should each local authority want to do something different? I'm conscious that we're coming into an election period next year. It's going to this contract is going to straddle two election terms. Although obviously Steve's longevity within Cardiff Council, I can't see that dramatically changing. But you don't know, a new administration might want to do something different at both authorities. So can we just possibly flesh out what we've got thus far on that in terms of governance, contract terms and conditions, I suppose, and future monitoring arrangements for this committee, really. Thanks.
Will do. Thank you, Chair. So as I mentioned, we're currently developing the delegation agreement at the moment. So our legal team is working with the Cardiff legal team, and we're pulling that together at the moment. That will have a 12-month review point. So there is that break clause that you mentioned, although you know, judging from this morning's debate and the quality of the debate, hopefully we won't be in that situation. We just move from strength to strength, but it is there. In terms of the plan itself and the monitoring plan, we will be working that up. What I suggested to Steve when we met sort of last week is that I would work that up with Scott, and then we're in a position then where, you know, we're covering, you know, what we feel we need from Monmouthshire perspective, in line with obviously with the review that Steve has already done. So we're not going to be a million miles away, but we will ensure that we bring that into you. And I was going to suggest sort of 6 monthly into E&D Select, if that is all right with you. So we can track progress, but obviously can do more or less depending on your work program, really. But yeah, so that would be what we would be looking to do, really. But Scott, in fairness, has already had some great ideas in terms of, you know, there's some key indicators that we want to look at, but importantly, building that around the priorities that we've mentioned before and that the whole debate's been about this morning, really. So I just feel like after this morning's discussion, we're all on the same page. It's just a matter of pulling everything together, really. Scott, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add into that.
No, Kath. I think from me, it's just making sure that the priorities are the council's priorities, and then we have a balanced, you know, a bit of a balanced scorecard, because as we've alluded to earlier, it's not all about price. So I guess it's about setting our stall out and making sure that we're then delivering on the priorities that you've agreed to.
Thanks, Scott. Anything else, Steve, that you wanted to add in?
I suppose the only thing is, yeah, I'm first of all, I suppose hopefully I'm going nowhere. You know, I've been there a long time, and for my sins, I have a 2.5-year-old, so I won't be retiring anytime soon. So, but I suppose the only thing I can say is that, and I think this is why I'm not sure I make a very good consultant, is that I'm very passionate about what I do for Cardiff, but I'm also very passionate about what I do for anybody I work with. Yeah, because so whether that's this bit of work I'm doing for Bristol at the moment or whatever, I approach it all with the same degree of passion and ownership and responsibility, no matter what I do. Yeah, and hopefully that's something Scott has seen over the years, and that will be absolutely no different for Monmouth. So, you know, I'm not saying there is any reservation, but it's not, I'm in no way intending that Monmouth will be second best. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, if entering into this arrangement, I will, you know, obviously I'm only one person and we'll be using the team to help deliver, but I can kind of reassure you that, you know, I will be totally committed to giving you the absolute best we can do for you guys, because I take this stuff very personally. You know, it's not, you know, and and I'm very passionate about it. So yeah, I suppose just to kind of give you that kind of reassurance. You know, no matter what we've got written in a plan, you know, if anything, we'll be looking to exceed and deliver beyond that.
Okay, thanks Steve, thanks Kath. Are there any? Yeah, I've got Councillor Greenham wanted to come in. Bob?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wasn't actually going to come in on this. I was just here to listen, really. But the one question which remains in my mind with my economic development hat on, and I did ask this same question when we had an informal discussion in Cabinet recently. It's about the effect of local businesses, and the point was made by Scott, I think, that actually there would be more opportunities opened up to local businesses by this joint arrangement than would have been before. Absolutely accepting. What I'd like to know is, in the reviews that we have, whether we will know whether businesses, local Monmouthshire businesses, have had more business out of this or less. In other words, what's the net effect on our Monmouthshire businesses? Because that, for me, is another important aspect of this. But look, I'm totally in favour of this. I've been really impressed with both of the presentations from Steve and from Scott today, and indeed, I'm very happy that the members are really involved in this committee are involved, and we can leave it up to them to properly scrutinise this. That's really good to know as well.
Thanks, Bob. Do you want to come back on that, Steve, in terms of business?
Yeah. So one of the things that I report quarterly into our senior management team at the moment is spend, local spend. So we both within Cardiff, within region, within Wales, so and we've already done when we did the initial review of the data from Monmouth, we'd already looked at an initial baselining. In fact, unusual for us, we started looking at some of the neighbouring English authorities as well, to try to, because we can all become quite isolationist at times, can't we? So but yeah, so looking at that slightly broader footprint in terms from a regional point of view. But absolutely, I think one of the things we'll be looking to develop is a kind of a set of key measures around performance, which will cover everything from, I suppose, eventually things around on-off contract spend through to social value achievements, through to things like spend with local businesses, and also increasing, looking at kind of small micro business spend as well. So that like I kind of said at the start, getting the data and the information and the insight we glean from that, because it's not the data in itself, but the insights we glean from that, for me, will be really key, both in terms of baselining where we're starting from, but also using that to track progress and ensuring that we don't end up with any unintended consequences of anything we do. So again, it's being mindful that as we take this forward, that there are going to be a number of kind of key metrics that we're going to need to continue to monitor.
Scott, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a very quick response to Councillor Greenland. I think one of the interesting dilemmas that we've got in Monmouthshire is, as you can imagine, when we report to Welsh Government, one of the metrics is spend within Wales. So I'm probably one of those people down at Welsh Government that they throw darts at, because I think one of my concerns is Monmouthshire is it's geographically placed where it is, and then we've got the spend within Monmouthshire, but equally important for me is that spend within the likes of Avonmouth and Hereford and the like, and Gloucestershire, because we've got people who live and reside in Monmouthshire that transition over the border. So they're quite interesting discussions to be having as well.
Thanks, Scott. Are there any other contributions members want to raise? Any observations? No, before I sum up. Okay, I think it's been a really good discussion this morning, really robust. As we said from the start, as a committee, this has been a real priority area for us from the start of the term back in 2017. We knew there, as Councillor Davies has said, we knew there's substantial benefits to be gained from improving our strategic procurement function. Not just delivering, our corporate plan objectives as a council, and obviously in terms of legislation, but the well-being and future generation goals. But in terms of shaping culture internally, and I've always liked to think as an authority we're quite forward-looking and innovative. As Scott said, we've got two experienced procurement experts within the authority, but that experience and capacity needs to be, I suppose it needs to be shared, and the additional knowledge and expertise that Cardiff will bring will allow that sharing and knowledge to move down through the authority at a quicker pace. It's just having two procurement officers to get a handle on what the various devolved departments are doing, and trying to support their objectives and their goals with just 2 people is just completely impractical, and remaining with the status quo is just simply not not a runner at all. So additional capacity, we can see from this model, in terms of greater knowledge and training and the sharing of that through the authority, through our current staff, we can see that as well. Going back to what Councillor Davis has said, is really important to have the right data in, and so we can analyse. So it's what inputs we're going to put in to get that data and those outputs out. Really important, and I think we're assured that in the sort of the next steps really is to start to build that that function up really, and understanding what data we need so we can interrogate that properly. We've touched on return of investment. I think that's obviously really important, not just the sell to the wider council, because obviously this needs to go to cabinet, this needs to go to wider council for approval, but ensuring that Monmouthshire taxpayers have the return on investment through improved services. Scrutiny, governance arrangements. I think members are probably content with the 6 monthly review process. We can build that into our forward work programme. If members want to ask additional questions or have additional thoughts about shaping that monitoring piece, then obviously come to myself or Kath. We can do that. We can build that in. It's important to have member input. We've touched on a number of different things this morning. Then, in terms of benchmarking, we looked at skills and capacity of our current staff. Going back to what Councillor Roden asked, what does success look like? And I think we've covered that in depth. And I think that's everything. Measuring, monitoring, and targeting. Obviously, that's going to be in the initial next steps. So we've got some recommendations. So in terms of the paper, 2.1 is to consider the proposal prior to it forming part of the 2021-22 council budget setting process. So if we agree to that now and move it on, it's up to Phil and the cabinet to find the money to do that. And then obviously subject to approval, committee to consider receiving 6-month updates in the initial period of delivery. So are we happy then? I don't think we need to take a vote, but I unless there's any specific dissent. Alan, you want to come back in? Sorry, you're on mute, Alan.
Sorry, Chair. I think Dave is going to propose what I was going to propose, which is that we accept the recommendations and move forward as quickly as possible. Dave's had his hand up anyway.
Sorry, Councillor Evans. David, do you want to?
I was going to do this exactly the same as Councillor Davis have just said, and I'd like to thank our senior staff for all their hard input. It's reassuring now that, and what I've heard this morning as well from Stephen Scott, is they've reassured me, because over the past I haven't been happy with some of the recommendations that's been brought to council, but I can go to bed tonight now and sleep.
Thanks, Dave. It's reassuring. Okay, Alan. Sorry, you wanted to come back in? Or was that a legacy hand?
No, sorry, Chair. I don't want to prolong the meeting for any longer than we got to, but I just wanted to make one point. That very important point that Scott made about training. And I would like to see coming back to the committee some sort of training programme, and there's obviously a resource implication there as well, not only in terms of a monetary resource but personnel resource as well. But I think that's very important that as part of this exercise the training is key, I think. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I'm having connectivity with my hand. No, that's. Could we build that into the recommendation then, in terms of training plan? Is something again we can bring back as under the that sort of procurement package is something that we can look at and monitor. Councillor Murphy, is that a new hand?
Yeah, one last point from for me. You said it was up to us to find the money. Are we explaining that cabinet on the 3rd and council on the 11th that we've already done that? So you can relax on that.
That's very good news. Thanks, Phil. So we've agreed those proposals then. So can I thank obviously Steve and Scott for your inputs this morning, and Kath, are you going to hang about, Kath? Because I think there might be some questions in terms of our forward work programme as well. You might be able to answer them.
Yes,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks.
Nice to meet you.
All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next item on our agenda then is item number 5, which is our forward work programme. You'll obviously see there the various LDP workshops that have been built in. Members will be aware we had to postpone the workshop this week, which was the infrastructure 2, which was the primary healthcare, because the health board was unable to attend, so we'll have to factor that in at some point in the future. In the next sort of 3 to 4 months, we'll have to fit in another one somewhere. I know the scheduling's tight, but that will need to be moved and put in there. So our next LDP workshop is on the 9th of March, and that's looking at which is infrastructure 3, which is looking at local transport planning and sustainable transport. We've got then, on our next meeting, we've got the local development plan, then to adopt the NDF and look at the implications for the reviewed LDP. And then we've got the city deal as well. Alan and Councillor Davis and I are attending the Cardiff Capital Region Joint Scrutiny Committee on Friday. And then in March, we'll have the programme director, Kelly Byrne, to come and give us an update on what's happened really over the last year. You know, there's obviously been some implication with the pandemic, but a lot of work has still been going on behind the scenes to prepare the city deal programme, to prepare them for the gateway review, which is the first sort of hurdle they need to get through to ensure additional funding is passed on then from UK government. So understanding progress on that, I think, is going to be really, really important. In terms of our other areas of scrutiny focus, we've got, obviously, there's a number of them still there we need to look on. Alan, I think you suggested in the pre-meeting you wanted to focus on the business and enterprise strategy.
Yes, thanks, Chair.
Yeah.
Obviously we are not in the cabinet and we're not involved in the discussions. But what I don't want to do is increase workload, particularly in these times when it is very difficult. And I understand that we have a number of priorities, or the cabinet have a number of priorities which they're concentrating on. So I think perhaps you and I can have some informal discussions with Kath, perhaps get a feel for where we are, and then if there are anything that we feel the committee feels they need to raise, then we can do that rather than put it as an agenda item at the moment. I think there's enough work to be done because of other matters which we're all aware of, I think. And there's going to be extreme pressure on our social services and other things, I think, over the next sort of 12 months or so. But I certainly value that discussion with Francis and Kath in the future. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Alan. And the other perspective for me really was, we're obviously coming round to the lockdown. So COVID, when you're on, is going to be an important aspect for to look at, not just within the guise of this committee, but corporately. I know the focus has been not to, because we've only got 1 year left of the administrative term, not to reorientate or reorganise the corporate plan, but take the plans on the page and look at that really for the next year as a platform for recovery. And I think we want to cover the areas around, business and economic development and modern life, and how we get our services generated income again for the authority. That's a really important part for us to look at. But this is going to go right across the corporate body, so there's going to be obviously areas of real pressure, particularly in social care. Alan's just mentioned. But Kath, do you want to come back on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think for me it was also a suggestion in terms of an update from our employment and skills team. They're 25 plus strong now, and they're doing an awful lot of work out in the community, particularly in terms of sort of working directly with businesses that are, going through various different changes. And I just wondered if an update in terms of all the different work strands that they are working on at the moment, particularly for our communities work, our apprenticeship and Kickstart program as well, would be good perhaps if you had an update on where they are. Okay.
Yeah, I think that'd be really helpful. Yeah, and it looks like you've got support from members as well on that. So yeah, thanks. Is there any other points on the our forward work program the members want to make? No. Okay, so the next agenda item then is item 6, which is the Council and Cabinet work planner. Is there anything there you feel that we're not covering within our remit of work? Is there nothing there? No, I think there's a lot of the stuff is factored in, but if you feel there's something there that we need to have some pre-decision scrutiny on, or we need to look at it in a bit more detail, then obviously come back to myself and Hazel, and we'll look to factor that in. So the last item, penultimate item on the agenda, item 7, is to confirm the minutes from the previous meeting held on the 21st of January. Do we have any issues with the minutes, or can they be proposed as accurate?
I propose as accurate, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Ronan. Do you have a seconder for that?
Yeah, I'll second that, Chair.
Councillor Strong. Okay, are we all happy, the minutes? Yeah, thanks both. Thanks very much. So the last item on the agenda is to confirm the date and time of the next meeting. I've got the 22nd of April here, but looking at the work planner, I think we're meeting in March, aren't we, Hazel? Yeah.
Yes, Chair, I believe it's the 23rd of March.
3rd of March, yeah. So it's not the April date that's there. It's the 23rd of March is our next meeting. So if there's nothing else, can I just obviously thank officers for their time and their contributions to the substantial item this morning on procurement. I think we're all really positive in terms of the direction. And can I thank councillors for all their contributions as well. Thanks very much, and we'll see you in March.
Right.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Take care.
Take care all.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.